Welcome back to the Mighty Merp podcast. I'm excited today to talk to John Koufos, who has had an interesting life. I think that's a nice way of saying it, right, John?
Very much so.
And an amazing pathway to where he started and sort of some highs and lows and what he's doing now in order to, I will say, help people in recovery. I'm just going to jump right in, John, because I think your story is so neat and interesting. I don't know if neat's the right word. That might be a poor word choice for an attorney.
That's fine. I tell people it's a great story. I just wish it wasn't mine.
I understand that. So, John, in your previous, I'm going to call it your previous life, you were a criminal defense attorney. And could you tell me sort of your path and how you ended up there?
Sure. So, I'm originally from Ocean County, New Jersey, although now I split my time between, Southern Jersey and DC. But I grew up in a very, very difficult environment. My father in and out of federal prison. In fact, he escaped from federal prison. He was on the run for 6 years. And I traveled the country at different times with him, living under assumed names as a kid. Mom had her own issues.
I'm so sorry, because our podcast isn't about that, but we could do a whole podcast on that, right?
Probably. My mom was a teenage mom, it was a very abusive household. And so I grew up in poverty. I was raised primarily in Ocean County, I think, as I said. And then, I end up going to college, a few years after I graduated high school in Brick, New Jersey. And then went to law school at Fordham, came back to clerk in Ocean County, worked at a law firm briefly in Ocean County. Great law firm, Bathgate, Wegner and Wolf, great people there. Larry Bathgate's tremendous lawyer. And I learned a lot from him, but I wanted to try cases. So I was in my 20s, so I opened up a law firm right away, and with another law clerk who actually worked at Bathgate. So we left almost at the same time. And when you're 20-something years old, it's Microsoft doesn't call you up to hire you as an attorney, right? The people in the community that do, and oftentimes they've gotten jammed up for something. So that's how I started my criminal law career, and I got lucky. I took to it. I had a lot of success. In about a year and a half from when we started in Brick, I had another office in New Brunswick, and I had cases all over the state. And I would become a very young certified criminal trial attorney. And I think I tried cases probably in at least half the counties in New Jersey, if I remember. But it was a wild time. A lot of murders, a lot of racketeerings, a lot of wiretaps. I just kept getting wiretap cases one after another. And I was, I had no life, so I would actually listen to all the sessions to figure out if we could do, intrinsic, extrinsic minimization, and so on.
So when you say you had no life, it just means you weren't married, you didn't have kids yet, I'm assuming, and you were.
That's correct.
So I'm going to take you back just a few steps, because you describe a very, I'm going to say, chaotic and maybe trauma-filled childhood, and then you actually skimmed over and I graduated high school and I went to college. And so I don't know if the graduating high school was kind of clean in my mind, but based on the childhood, how did you get to I'm going to college? Because it doesn't seem like that necessarily was the path based on the childhood.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I graduated high school, and I didn't go to college right away. I worked a bunch of odd jobs, and I worked at a gas station, a nursing home. I was a maintenance man at a hotel, and I was just like a typical Jersey Shore kind of guy, right? Graduated high school, drank, worked for beer money, and that was really all I did. No real direction, no future. And it was a buddy of mine. His father was a police captain in Bloomfield. And, he had taken a liking to me. And he said, just go to college, right? Like, just go to college. And, you can do something with yourself, whether it's in criminal justice or something like that. I'll help you in any way I can. So I was like, forget that. I'm not doing that shit. And, I just kept, doing my own thing. Finally, he bothered me enough. And then I was working, I was working in a nursing home at one point. And like, that is where, as I started to see people's sort of last step in life, and I realized like I was wasting mine at like 19. At 20, I moved to New York and went to John Jay College, and I did pretty well there. I ended up getting into an advanced bachelor's master's combined program, so you can get both degrees in 5 years. I further cut that down to 3 years, or actually 2 years and 11 months. I graduated with both degrees, and I graduated high enough in the class and did well in the LSATs, so I got a half ride to Fordham. And then
That,
so I went from so in Cantley, like in a matter of 3 years or 30 something months, I went from like getting drunk, in a nursing, after my nursing home job or at a hotel to saying, wait, I'm about to go to a top tier law school. And, it was a sort of a surreal experience, from white trash to the ivory tower, so to speak.
there you go. Were you, it sounds like you didn't have time to do anything else but study, but were you drinking through college and law school, or were you
Oh, absolutely.
focused?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. No, no. I was drinking, almost continuously since 15 years old. I was working as well. I would work on the weekends. I was a security guard, and I would work in I worked 2 16-hour shifts on the weekends, and I do all my studying there actually. So, yeah, but then when I wasn't there, yeah, I was partying, as much as I could fit in.
Do you sleep?
Back then I didn't. I was actually an insomniac as well, which was good when you're trying to get a lot of things done. But I didn't realize I did, as we'll get to later in my story. I didn't realize that the toll all this was taking on me. Right. So, but at that point, but it worked really well to get through law school and college fast and to try cases in many cases. Right.
Right. It's like you sped through all of that, and it is pretty amazing even to be opening up your own law firm in your 20s. It sounds like even though you started college late, you finished law school relatively young.
Yeah, and I think one joke I made to a governor once, who wanted me to build something for them. I said, look, Rome wasn't built in a day because I wasn't there, right? So, I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to get this thing on the road here. But yeah, no, in many ways, I think I ripped through it because I was trying to almost buy time back, because I had, can't really fucked around for 3 years. Pardon my language.
That's okay. That's okay. Um, I say that it's normal for criminal defense attorneys to actually curse when we're not in the courtroom and to describe either our clients or our cases or just the stress level, all of it. So
Sure.
you were in your 20s, you opened up your own law firm, you're trying high profile cases. I
I
assume
got my first one. It's actually funny. It's funny. So I'd gotten a few, decent sized cases, and then and I had done a little bit of pool work for some of the public defenders' offices. And I randomly get assigned or asked to take a case by the Monmouth County Public Defender's office of a racketeering from a very, very high profile, leader of the Bloods out of Newark, who the AG's office had done a state racketeering and they venued it in Monmouth County, right? Obviously, they venued it down there because they picked one guy from Monmouth County and knew you get a better jury than you get in Newark. So they sent all these Newark boys down there, right? I mean, it's venue shopping at its best. So I get asked to take the case, and the state had already frozen all this guy's assets. That's why he didn't have his normal, well-paid lawyer from Newark. And he was in the county jail for 700 days or something like that, and there were all kinds of problems in the case. So I brought it to him and I said, "Look, here's the things that are messed up in your case." And he said, "Well, I'm going to trial." And I said, "Okay." And so I started motion practice, and the motions were good enough where we were able to get the attorney general's office to agree to give him time served. So he walked out of Monmouth County Jail like within just a month or two of knowing me. And he actually had no ride because he had no friends in Freehold, as you can imagine. So I picked him up when they let him out of the county jail. I drove him to Newark and we started bullshitting. And from there, all of a sudden, everyone in Newark sort of knew who I was, right, in all these other areas. So then I start calling this like random guy from South, well, like Central Jersey, and that
Not South,
I
not
think
South, because, as somebody who's in South in
right,
Atlanta, I probably wouldn't be driving up no matter what
that's right,
yeah, not going up there.
right.
Too far.
Well, yeah, no, it was a long drive, but it turned out to be one of the most important drives I ever made for my career. I didn't know it at the time, and then from there, I just kept getting lots more cases all around the state.
Yeah. Did you see when you said you picked him up at in Freehold at in Monmouth County, and I just like shook my head, and I was thinking, I wonder if this is the difference between a male attorney and a female attorney, because there's lots of things I do for my clients. I mean, I really, want to go out of my way to provide the personal service and to let them know that like they can call my office at any time. I don't prevent them from doing that. I actually make it so that they can call me at any time. But I would never, ever, ever let a client into my car. It doesn't
Nor
matter.
should you. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Nor should you. I mean, I especially, I think that, the dynamics of, who we serve as criminal defense lawyers, right? You got to be, I mean, you got to be able to handle yourself and, right. And obviously not saying that you're probably not a great fighter, but, you're also probably 5'3" and, or
Because
something
you've
like
met
that. So,
me in person and
yeah,
know that I'm
right,
five.
right. Right. So, I think it's smart. No, if my daughters ever became lawyers, I would, well, first of all, I try to talk them out of becoming lawyers. And then if they decided to do that, I talk them out of doing criminal defense. And if I couldn't do that, I'd tell them, don't let anyone in the car.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So you ended up, after that amazing sort of amazing win, and I always tell people that it's motion practice is where you're really gonna,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, and win cases or get cases to the point that you are getting offers that are too good to refuse. But
that's right.
um, so this is how long? So you had all this success. You're still in your 20s, right?
No, at this point, I'm moving into my 30s. Yeah.
Okay, and you're still a partner with the same person?
Yep. Yep. We had some lawyers working for us, and she'd specialized mostly divorce law, and sort of the funding model was, let's use sort of the criminal practice and the divorce practice to fund select good personal injury cases, right? So
Hmm.
that way we could, fund those contingencies from time to time, and that's how we operated the firm.
Okay, and how long were you in practice altogether?
I think it was 9, 10 years, somewhere around there.
Yes, so and because you had to be certified after 7, you need 7 years to be certified, I think.
I think it was 5 back then, to be honest. It was 5, I thought. But I'm going back. Remember, I haven't practiced since 2012.
So, so what sort of happened that you ended up stop practicing?
Sure. So, well, so I mentioned a little bit, about when I started drinking, and I was, the very definition of a functional alcoholic. To the outside world, life was good. I was making money, and things looked nice. In my personal life, there was not much there. Every time I wasn't in trial, I was drinking, and so much so, my law partner, God bless her, she when she'd cover certain cases, if I'd be in another court and she'd sign the trial memos, she would literally put trials back to back to back to back if she could with me because she knows I wouldn't drink during trial, right?
I
And
was
so
going to ask, did she know? Did the people around you, maybe the
everybody,
judges and the
everybody
court
knew.
staff?
I don't, it's interesting. I don't think it was a surprise, and yes, most people knew. My law partner certainly knew, and she tried her best to right the ship. And we're still very close. In fact, she's a godmother to my first daughter. That's how close we are. And so there was no listen. There was definitely no secret. That John was an active alcoholic at the time. Um, so here I am. Just sort of going through life, case to case to case, and June of 2011. I'm leaving a bar association event drunk, right? And as I always drove drunk, candidly, and this time it would have near fatal consequences for somebody else. Um, I was drinking. I was texting. I was in a meaningless argument with somebody on the phone. It was just it was everything toxic on the back end of a bender, and the car started to veer to the right because I'm busy being drunk and looking at my phone and doing all these different things. I hear two really loud booms, um, and I see a bunch of dust behind me. And I didn't, for a very brief period of time, I don't know what I hit. So I left and I drove to the first police station that was closest, which was Maniloking, because the accident happened. My crimes occurred. I committed my crimes in Lavalette, and I'm very, you'll hear me correct myself a lot. Like, you know, there was obviously a car accident where I hit a pedestrian, um, but like those were crimes I committed. That was just not a car accident where someone sideswiped somebody. Those were crimes that I committed. So I drive to the police
Stop
station.
the car. You didn't
No,
stop the car.
no. I drive to the police station. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say you didn't stop the car. You initially didn't know what you hit. When did you, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but when did you learn that you hit a person?
I think I've gone over this in my head for 12 years now. When did I, looking back, it had to be just a minute, 2 minutes after I left that scene. And where I remember being drunk behind that wheel, and I'm looking at the windshield. I'm still not looking at the road, by the way. I'm looking at the windshield. And it's like, you never, I'm looking at the circular break in the window and the windshield. And I'm like, holy shit, I hit somebody. But now I'm not at the scene anymore. What the fuck do I do? So I drive to the police station. It's the next thing I do. I mean, that's what a drunk, it doesn't make sense today, but at the time it seemed like it made sense.
Well, it's somebody who's drunk, but also a lawyer. So you have like some knowledge, right? I mean, you went to the police station.
Yeah, but and the sad thing is, this was the conclusion of a 20-year, or the beginning of the end of a 20-year battle with active alcoholism and some of that undiagnosed trauma we touched upon in the beginning of the interview. And so I drive to the Maniloking police station, stop the car there. I leave all my stuff in there, right? Because I'm going in. And remember, I told you I heard two booms, right? The first was the person I hit. The second was in Lavalette. They used to have these. There were no sidewalks. They have these raised drains. So I would learn later. I hit the person, then I ran over the raised drain, and that becomes important right now. So I parked the car right in front of the police station on Downer Avenue in Maniloking Road. Leave all my shit in there, and begin walking towards the door. And if I never look back at the car, Melissa, I just walk into the police station and I get arrested. And life, the second half of this never happens. But I look back at the car and I see the damage to the car, and I went into a complete panic. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I did there's no great cover up here, right? There's no well thought out, cover up thing. I walked away and I left the car in front of the police station with all my stuff in there.
Here's the evidence.
Yeah, the whole car. But that wasn't. I mean, I wish my thought was that. I just walked away, and I was already having deep depression and other problems. And obviously washed awash in alcohol. And I decided that I was going to tie a few things up, and I had a legally registered 45 at home, and then I was going to kill myself. That was the plan. And it's so funny because people, funny is a bad word, but it's like, it's so funny to say now because I can't believe that was my life then. And that was a logical plan to me. And I said, all right, well, I there's no way I could deal with, God forbid, I killed somebody, etc. So I stayed on the bender for 3 more days. And towards the third day, I started to clear up. My law partner, who I told you about, was really the impetus behind not killing myself. And then on the third day, I called a lawyer friend of mine. I think it was on your, well, his father, called his father, Donald and Jonathan Lemira. I think you had Richie Lemira on the show. Richie's a good friend, as are all the Lemiros are very close friends. They're like family to me.
Yeah.
They guided me through a very difficult time in my life and this time I'm telling you about. And I called I called John, and John and Don came over, and I said, "Look, this is what happened." I was still probably drunk when I was talking to them, actually. And then when they came to my house, and I said, "Go surrender me." And that was the third day in, or maybe the fourth day in. I said, "Go surrender me." So Don, God bless him, he went to the Ocean County prosecutor's office, tried to surrender me. They had nothing to surrender me to. There's no warrant.
I
So
was going to ask, was there a warrant? And I know my mind
nope,
is behind you on this story, but did you ever call an ambulance or call 911? Was
no,
there any? So there was no.
nope, nope.
So Don went to the prosecutor's office, and there's no warrant, but
Yeah, but I mean, this wasn't exactly you didn't exactly have to be, Sherlock Holmes to figure out what was going on here, right? Like John's car is sitting in front of the police station, damaged. John is nowhere to be seen. And then what happened was, again, I said I lied my way out of it. Or let me go back. I lied to delay time. And I had a great friend, Melissa, a guy who was more like a brother to me than anything else. And he's watching me. He watched me deteriorate for a long time, and he was concerned about my suicide. And he said, "John," he goes, "Look, just buy yourself, like, I'll say I did it, until we figure this whole thing out." So I said, "Sure, go ahead," because I figured I'd be dead in a few days anyway, and then I would just write a suicide note. This is where your head goes when you have unchecked when you don't check your mental illness and you try to drown it in booze and substances and those sorts of things, right? All these things I'm telling you, right,
right,
are
none
are,
of it
are,
makes
are
sense.
no, it's not. I mean, that's the thing. But like I said, this was no great cover-ups, no crime of the century. So my friend goes in, takes the hit, right? Says he was driving that night, right? And obviously everybody knows he wasn't driving that night, right? Lemiro's saying, "Look, here's John with, put the cuffs on him. He's ready to surrender." They don't generate a warrant or anything until it's like a week later. So I'm like hanging out, waiting to be told when to surrender to my crimes.
Hmm. And so, did you go into custody at that time when the week of the warrant being issued?
Oh, yeah, so I was waiting around, and most of my time, candidly, was consumed, desperately trying to figure out if I had killed somebody, right? So because I didn't know what the status was of the person I had hurt, and thank the Lord. By the way, thank just because for the listeners, right? The person, thank God, recovered, is not in a wheelchair, went on to, you know, get a master's degree and do all kinds of great things in her life. No thanks to me, by the way. Everything I did was make that worse and nearly killed this poor person. So, God really gave me a blessing as well as giving obviously them a blessing. But, God really made, really, I always tell people, if you don't believe in God after hearing what I did, right, and how this person should have been dead, then I don't know what would ever make you believe in God, because there's no logical reason that person should be alive. And it's been a very tough thing for me to live with, but I caused it. So to answer your question, yes, on the following, it was literally like a week later, I get a
What'd you do
call.
for the week? I mean, are you, um, I understand what you were doing for the first few days. The first few days you were planning your end,
Yeah, I was on a bender, right, and doing all that. Yep.
and then there came a time where something switched, you know.
Well, so partially, right, and I'm because, like, it wasn't like my law partner showed up and I said, "Well, suicide's off the table now, right? Because you're here, right?" I kind of told her I was gonna, it was fine, right? Because she had, personal experience with a suicide that really affected her, and she knew that if she pulled on those heartstrings with me, that I would bite, and because she's a very good advocate, and an even better friend. Um, but yeah, so I wasn't, so for me, suicide wasn't off the table. I just told her it was off the table. So my plans were only delayed, not derailed.
Hmm.
So because again, it wasn't necessarily it wasn't the arrest that was the catalyzing event to suicide. I wasn't that wasn't the issue. Was for years I knew I was an alcoholic. For years I knew I was falling apart, and for years the way I dealt with that and why I didn't do anything about it was to say, well, I'm not hurting anybody else. So that whole identity was shattered. And, interestingly enough, just sticking with recovery for a second, before this ever happened, you know, I knew I was going down a path so bad. I went to see a judge friend of mine in Middlesex County, and I said, "Look, I'm falling off, man." It was probably April or May, and this thing happened in June, and or March or April, I should say, because a few months before. And he referred me to lawyers' assistants. They did such a wonderful, wonderful job, but I was so far off the reservation, right? Like I needed, at that point in my life, I needed to be locked in a rehab. That's what I needed with co-occurring treatment. So the warrant gets issued. They say, go surrender yourself. I show up at the sheriff's department. I, get printed, and then I have bond waiting for me. And these days we still had cash bail. So they had $150,000 bond on me, which I thought was kind of surprising because it was my first offense. And I certainly wasn't a flight risk unless you count going to the grave flight. So in any event, I bonded right out. So I never set foot in the county jail.
Mhm.
And then that began, well, it was the beginning of the end of my law practice. So I had to tie up the law practice. I had to somehow try to stay sober. Get sober, excuse me. I had to figure out if I was really going to kill myself or not. I had to figure out, like, have I killed somebody? Like, have I made someone going to be on a ventilator their whole life? Like, what the fuck did I do here? Right.
Mhm.
And the worst part about that, and I deserve every bad thing that's happened. So I don't want anyone to think that, anyone should feel bad for me. They shouldn't. I put myself in every one of these situations. Like every minute you recover, the shitty things you do become clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. So it's like this weird thing where you think, oh, I'm getting sober, I'm doing these things, and then all the horrible things are now no longer these foggy things you're looking at. They're real, right? Um, so
Yeah.
anyway,
So
so I'm
I
wrapping up my law practice,
was.
and I'm wrapping up the law practice, and still tried. My clients wanted me to still try cases, so I still tried a few cases. I argued won a case before the New Jersey Supreme Court while I was out on $150,000 bond, which that's like the old Barry Bonds like home run record with the asterisk, right? Like it's something that might have happened. It might have been like very interesting, but nobody wants to ever have claimed that record. And then I pled guilty. And I asked Don. I said, Don, just plead me at the first thing. In fact, plead me pre-indictment. I don't care. Just get me to plead, because accepting responsibility was is the cornerstone of recovery. So I knew I could never do that. Um, and I desperately wanted to apologize, but I was never able to speak to the person I had hurt.
So, John, let me ask you this. Um, were you, from the time that you turned yourself in, we'll say in processed and then released, were you in active recovery at that point? Did you stop drinking? So I'm going to ask you, this is usually a question I ask all my clients to determine whether I think they're really sober. Do you have a sobriety date of is the day you stopped drinking? Is it that date?
No, my sobriety date's March 16th of 2012. The crimes occur on June 17th of 2011. So, no, getting sober remember, I'm someone who drank if things were good, bad, or otherwise. So imagine under these circumstances, I'd string together a little sobriety. I'd drink, and it would happen again and again and again. And then what happened was, it's interesting enough. I went to a place, Seashore Family Services in Brick, and I'm like, I better just go to like inpatient here, right? So I go there and I tell them I want to go to inpatient, and they do their assessment. And they said, well, I remember they asked. They said, so how many how many drinks do you have a week? I'm like, no, 80, 90. And I remember the woman she was probably in like 21 years old, right? Fresh out of social work school, right? Getting her clinical hours. She's like, no, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't ask per month or, every, I'm looking per week. Like 80, 90, right? And basically what they diagnosed me with was like a whole series of like major depression, all these other psychological issues from probably trauma filled past, and an obvious chronic alcoholism. So they said, John, we don't have a bed like that for you. I said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, and I wasn't going to do like the Florida thing or anything. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to do any of that stuff. I said, so what do I do? And they said, well, you can start in our IOP program, intensive outpatient. I said, all right, let's sign up. So that is actually where things started to get better, because you get a therapist at IOP as well. And I never really had a therapist that I was attached to.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether with the sobriety you address the mental health because
So that's actually it's a perfect question, because I once I started getting that level of therapy, and then I also saw a therapist on site. Now I would only go to a psychologist, and I'm not down on anyone who has to take medication for mental health issues, right? But for me, I was terrified that I was going to trade booze for something else,
Mhm.
right? So I said, I'm going to try to beat this thing without any pills at all. And then it was funny because my doctor, my primary, gave me Lexapro. And I took it wrong. I took it when I thought I was sad instead of taking it every day. I was like, this thing, I'm not taking this anymore. And, but, uh, but anyway, so once I started getting that therapy, right, then things started to come into focus. So once I started to get the therapy, it was easier to stop drinking. And then I paired that with AA meetings, lots of them. So I'd be at IOP and AA on times I wasn't at IOP, right, just to sort of stay grounded. And I was doing well for a while. IOP was a challenge, though. IOP is supposed to be whatever it is, 12 weeks or whatever it's supposed to be. And, mine was like 20 weeks or something because I kept pissing hot, right? With alcohol. So God bless them. They didn't throw me out. They just said, okay, we're going to start you back at phase one, whatever the phase is. So, and thank God that the social worker there, the therapist name was Laurel DeLuca. I mean, if I could ever thank her today, I mean, she changed my whole life. She was a therapist that was assigned to me. So anyway, so I string together some sobriety, and then they indict me, which I expected, and then I tried to plead guilty at the first court appearance, but the state wasn't ready.
so
And
just so
then,
we're clear, you one count indictment.
oh no, they charged me. They how indictments are. They indict you for things, or anything under the sun they could have indicted me for. So like it was, leaving the scene of an accident with serious bodily injury, aggravated assault, they accused me of like hindering apprehension. They accused me of witness tampering, which whatever. So um, so I said, look, just plead me guilty. Let's just get me a deal.
The leaving
Uh,
the scene was what you were pleading guilty to?
I ended up pleading guilty to leaving the scene of an accident, right, for the crime of hurting the person, and then hindering apprehension for lying about it. And then the state wanted to plead a witness tampering as well. I said, it's fine because the hindering and the witness tampering, there is no real witness tampering. It was a hindering. They're going to merge anyway. It doesn't, if that makes you happy so I can move on, fine. So that's why I did that. But more importantly than that, to be honest, the most interesting legal part of this whole thing to me, because just a standard, addict hurts somebody, right, and goes to prison, is the civil piece of it. So what happened was, and God bless Don Lemuro. I'm like, I said, Don, I want to call Geico and tell my insurance company, tell them everything that happened to get these people some money. And Don's like, we don't have a deal yet. You can't be doing any of that stuff. And Don, and Don's, was just such a good man, but I would fight with him all the time. I said, listen, I'm not going to, because you practice law. The popular wisdom in these kind of cases is you drag the civil suit out, you drag it out forever. And if the victim needs money, right, eventually they relent to a better plea agreement to the prosecutor, and then they get their money, and then you do that, right? That's standard what
Well,
defense
yeah, not
lawyers do.
only that, I mean, as your criminal defense attorney, I would say you can't give a statement to the insurance company.
Oh yeah,
It's going
Don.
to be
Yep,
used against you. Like,
yep.
I mean, I have a standard letter to the insurance company that says, because due to the criminal matter, my client will not be providing any statements. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the effects of the civil, but not even going that far. I'm like, you're not giving a statement. And
Yeah.
then, and it's hard because, I'm sure Don still wanted to protect you from yourself.
Exactly, exactly. And Don, I think every lawyer is like, how many CYA letters do I got to write this guy? This guy's my friend. Why is he breaking my chops like this?
Right.
Um, but Don, I eventually harassed him enough where he got us settled up with Geico. So they got the whole policy, thank God, before anything else happened, right? Like before I had a deal, none of that stuff, right? Because I mean, I can't build a time machine to stop what happened, right? So this is the next best thing. I was just trying to do anything I could to 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 help, right?
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, so I plead guilty. Um, and the deal's 6 years, three for the leaving the scene, three for the hindering. State asked for consecutive sentences. I had hoped they'd run them concurrent. Got the sentencing, they didn't run them concurrent, right? So
But they were nice
um,
flat sentences, right?
they were, but the well, yes, they were, and I'll just leave it at
I
that.
know this might be too much technicality, but there was no mandatory amount of time. You didn't have to serve, uh,
No, but the misnomer that every defense lawyer, or not every, but many defense lawyers tell their client, "Oh, you have a three flat, you'll be out in 9 months." Like that's not how the real world works. You have to be very, and I didn't know that till I was in prison. You have to be very, very, very concerned about that back number, particularly the higher profile of an inmate you are,
mhm,
because the prospect of someone like me, a high profile gang lawyer, getting parole with no political connections is like near zero.
mhm. So how much you went in on a 6-year sentence?
Yeah. And then, of course, everything I just told you, right? I'm happy to eat my words at this point because I go up before the parole board at 16 months, 17 months. And to my surprise, they let me out. But I had nowhere to go. Um, and God bless the parole board. People complain about the parole board. I mean, the parole board is one of those places that really saved my life. When I spoke to them, I said, look, I'm going to be coming out, if you let me out, to a whole new world of challenges. I have bankrupt, no law license, no home, right? I have nowhere to live. My house was foreclosed upon. Um, I said, I need you to order IOP again because it's the only thing that ever worked for me. And I have no money to pay for it on my own because I have nothing. I have nothing. Um, and God bless them. They let me out and they ordered me to IOP as I asked. Um,
And your
you know,
license was suspended at that point?
yeah,
Was
no,
your
your license is automatically suspended when you plead guilty to a felony.
it hadn't been you're presently disbarred, correct?
Correct.
So that occurred after you came out of jail,
Yeah, it's a really
prison.
interesting story, actually. So I'll tell you that in 1 second. So I end up. They agree to parole me. I parole out to a law school buddy's house in Hoboken, which is not really where a drunk goes to get sober. If any of your listeners know where Hoboken is, there's like 98 bars in a 1.25 square mile house, 1.25 square mile town. But there was a lot of great recovery there. And again, the parole board was wonderful as far as they were hard, but they were so fair and they gave me the tools I needed. I had a wonderful parole officer, a guy named Peter Sandy, who just, really cared about recovery. Right.
Mhm.
And so these people who were, just in my life, all were key components to any success I have today. Um, but no, actually, so I get out in October of 13 and, and I end up at some point in January, I think it was, the Star Ledger ran a story that I was out. And they ran a story about it. And then all of a sudden, I get like a FedEx disbarment complaint from ethics. So here I am on parole, going through bankruptcy, trying to stay sober, go to meetings, do all my parole stuff, work. Um, and I ended up representing myself before the DRB. And then I won 6-2.
Is the disciplinary review board for
Oh,
the
yes, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, the disciplinary
no,
review board. So I won 6-2. They agreed to a 3-year perspectives suspension, which would have been like a 5-year suspension if you added up all the time. But only the Supreme Court, right, can hand out discipline. So Supreme Court takes the case and gives me a hearing. So I knew we had a problem right away, right, that we had to go to a hearing. And then I had a lawyer for that one, which a wonderful guy represented me for free, referred to me by a federal judge friend actually, and the guy did just a wonderful job. Named Tim Donahue from up in West Orange,
Mhm.
and and we lost by one vote. before the Supreme Court, and we're just biting. And I joke with Tim. I said, when I did this shit on my own, we were fine. But I'm only joking. Tim did an absolutely wonderful job. And then sort of the joke about it that it was, if you add up all the votes for me and all the votes against me, I was like Hillary Clinton. I'd won the popular vote, but I lost all the votes that mattered. So
Right. And you do know, like I would say, like once the Supreme Court said they were reviewing it, you weren't winning, right?
it was going to be tough. It was going to be tough. But we got within one vote, right? So it was a 4-2 decision. So had it been 3-3, it would have deferred to the decision below. And what's fascinating about the case is that we'll talk about a shitty week. So I find out I'm getting disbarred. The decision comes down February 15, and like March of 15, my first round of monthly payments for my Chapter 13 bankruptcy were to begin. So I knew I was never going to have the income I once had, or at least that was in my head at the time. I would never have the same income I would once have, and now I have to pay this, and try to stay sober, and try to be on parole, and do all these things. Again, all situations I caused for myself, but I'm just telling you what was in my head, at this particular time in my life.
Right. It is a lot. And you remain sober at that time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Up till today.
Right. I mean, it's just a really interesting and amazing story that once you are dealing with the mental health and the sobriety, that even when you probably had greater stresses at that point in your life than ever
Sure.
before. And probably all the hardworking jobs that you had prior to college and law school. I mean, you always know how to work. You weren't making the same money, but you know how to work, which is sounds silly, but it's a skill set that some people don't have.
No, it is. It is. And the other thing that I haven't touched on, because I mean it's just so it's just always there to me. So sometimes I forget when I'm doing, and I'm doing media. Like there's never a day where I don't feel horrible for what I did that night. Not horrible for having no law license. I mean, look at, if you were to look at me today and say, oh, the guy's been on stage with President Obama and President Trump and worked with half the governors in the country and works with major businesses and built programs, like people would say, oh, it looks like it worked out for him. Everything's cool for him. It's not really the case. And I go back to, and you might have heard this story in another context, when my first daughter was born, when Vienna was born here at GW Hospital in DC. And it was the greatest moment of my life for like a minute, 40 seconds. And then my thought went immediately to the fact that the father of the person I hit once held their child the same exact way I held Vienna that day. And I nearly took this poor guy off the count. And that was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, right? So it's never not there. And then happened again when my other daughter, Kalina, was born. And again, no one should feel bad for me. But I think that there's sort of this belief that, you commit crimes, you go to prison, and, you never give a fuck after that. And that's just not the way it is, Melissa.
Right. Well, it's
Yeah.
sobering. It's like with every piece of joy that you have, and you should have that joy. I'm sure that's part of your sobriety and the ability to keep maintaining it is to know to remember and to acknowledge the true ramifications of your
That's
actions.
right. That's right.
And
And you know what?
not minimize it in any way.
And it's exactly right. And my worst day, feeling as bad as I did for what I caused, is still better than the worst days that I caused that person I hurt and their family. And that never, it's so funny, in the sense that people say, John, you got to let it go. You have to do those things. Go get another job. We don't have to talk about this shit anymore. And I don't talk about it because it's my job. I talk about it because I hope it helps somebody, right? Because there are listeners you're going to have, especially with your vast listenership, right? Who are going through something like I was going through, have a friend going through something like I was going through. And my hope is that hearing this story and maybe the work that I've done will help them make a different decision than I made and not do what I did. And that's why I do this.
Yeah, I mean, the question really always comes up at this point is what do we recommend when people are struggling? We know that mental health and alcoholism is a huge issue among lawyers. We know the statistics of alcoholism among lawyers, as well as mental health, suicide, depression. There's a large percentage of attorneys that don't even want to be practicing law anymore because of the level of stress. And I guess, like, whenever I get to this part of the conversation, I always want to say, like, what can we do? Where should people go? I mean, I know there's services, but, you know, um, what would have made a difference in your life at that time?
It's hard to calculate. I don't know. I want to say, and it's not the judge's responsibility to do this, by the way, but because my career is the only thing that I was doing with myself, right? At that point, now I'm married, I have children. Back then, I wasn't anything. Like I had nothing like that, no family. Um, when I needed help, I went to a judge, and the judge got me help, right? And
Mhm.
I think that because that was who mattered to me in my world. I think it's going to vary from person to person, right? But the one thing about the stress of law, people always say, John, if they let you practice again, what are you going to do? And so, well, I'm going to get my law license back just to have it. But I'm not going back to trying cases, right? I'm not going back to to
Don't
that
go
world.
back.
No,
Don't
I
go
never,
back.
I wouldn't. What I may do, maybe I'd, do like a legal services nonprofit because I have access to various philanthropies and things of that nature. And the networks I have are much better now than I had in practicing law, candidly. I mean, the ironic part of this like whole story, right, is like
Yeah,
is
we
right
haven't
there.
even gotten
Right,
to the ironic part
right. The
yet.
ironic part is that here I was, I didn't know a single politician, and I didn't know anyone who, any policymakers. And, since 2014, I've worked with, governors all across the country. I helped in New Jersey I help Governor McGreevey, former Governor McGreevey, execute his vision to build a statewide reentry program. And that allowed also Volunteers of America in South Jersey, who have been doing wonderful work for decades, right? A whole new funding stream, right, that came through the grant that started the New Jersey Reentry Corporation. We had 5 former governors on our board. I was asked to be the executive director of it, which I actually initially said no, and then I said yes. And then I built a bunch of sites for the NJRC, and then I was asked to come to DC in 2017, end of 2017, by the attorneys for Charles and David Koch. Right, Charles and
Mhm.
David Koch, David, God rest his soul. They were big supporters of many libertarian causes and were big supporters of criminal justice reform, public safety focused criminal justice reform, employment for people with records, for the right people, right, who are trying to actually better themselves and can add value to businesses, and so many other wonderful causes. So they brought me to DC, and that was how I ended up working with President Trump.
So, yeah, I mean, I definitely, and again, you're such a great storyteller, but yet what sometimes you skip, and I'm like, wait, 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 I want to know. And I think people want to know, how did you go? And and so I have like 5 different thoughts at the same time. So I'm going to
Sure.
organize. Let me
Fire
organize.
away.
So my first thought, and I'm going to do it in the order that they had, was when we were talking about getting your law license back and practicing again. I want it clear that I love practicing law. And when I say no, 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 don't do it, the level of stress in being a criminal trial attorney, um, and to running a business and a practice, I would say, um, is what I don't always recommend. Individual cases, helping my clients when I am able to uh, advocate for them in a way that gets them the right result and a fair result. I love that. But I got to tell you, I'm exhausted by the end of the day. And I think I'm
I
52, and I think I don't know if I could do this for 20 more years or 15 more years,
and I loved it. I loved it too. And if there's any part of the practice of law I miss, it's that. Right. It's the
Right.
ability to help someone, you know, either protect them from an injustice, right? Or,
Mhm.
or helping someone get their life back together, or all the different things we do as defense lawyers. So I definitely miss that. But I've been very lucky to be in the position I am. And I
Right.
feel like, God has put me in this particular position. And to me, I don't know that I want, with a 4-year old and a 1-year old, that I'm gonna go. I would be interested in going back and rocking and rolling in courtrooms.
No.
I mean, I have no doubt that I could do it. Um, but I don't know. But I mean, I do think I would like the option, right? And I also think I would like the insurance policy, so to speak, of having that where I could, I mean, candidly, with what I do now, I could practice law and be like a government affairs lawyer if I needed to because of the type of things I do today, right? I don't have to go back into a courtroom and slug it out.
Correct. But I think, you worked at something, you earned that law degree, and I do think that there should be a path to obtain your license again. So I hope that whether you use it or not. But what's interesting is that you have this platform. You've made a huge difference with reentry programs and working with governors. And so the real question is, what happened from when you were released? How did you end up connecting with former Governor McGreevey? How did you end up sort of having this platform? And then, kind of in the context of this, as well as your sobriety and your mental health, you really do talk about your belief in God and how thankful you are for where you are, and sort of I almost would say, in the opportunity to, uh, continue do the work that you're doing right now. And uh, I don't know if you can address like the spirituality, and did you have that belief in God beforehand? And it
No,
just
I'll start there. No, no, God was someone that, my mentally ill alcoholic mind blamed for everything that went wrong in my childhood. Anytime something didn't go my way, it was all God, everybody else's fault but mine. But anything good that happened was all me, of course, right? That's about as logical as that makes about as much sense as my cover up, right?
yeah, sounds like
Um,
a trial attorney though.
Right, right. So, and then, drown that in alcohol. And so no, I was not God was not a friend of mine in my view when this all was going on. So anyway, so I get out and I had a job. I was working at a company in Trenton because I knew the CEO, doing office type work, things of that nature. And but I couldn't do anything that was good for my soul. So when I was practicing, I did a lot of work for the NAACP in Middlesex County, right? I would help them with
Mhm.
civil rights cases, old expungement clinics, etc., for family members of their members. But I couldn't do that because I had no license. So I saw something in prison because you see, look, I think a lot of people go to prison, they come out, they complain about everything in prison. Like prison's not supposed to be the Hilton, okay? So I'm not one of those people that says, the food sucks. Well, yeah, the food does suck, right? And it's actually crazy when I watch prison shows when they show prisons around the world. Usually the food is better in the prisons in those prisons than where I was, right? But
Right.
like that's prison, right? Don't come to prison if you don't want to deal with that.
Right. The beds
Um,
are too, on the TV shows, they always show beds with like cots with an actual mattress. And I'm like,
right,
not
right.
really what New Jersey prisons look like.
No, but the one thing that really stuck out at me in prison, I saw the very worst in some people, but I also saw the very best, right? But I also got a great understanding of why some of the things go the way they go when it comes to recidivism and reoffense. And I remember just sitting there watching people go out to parole and halfway houses and then be sent back for some unpaid ticket, unpaid fine, unpaid fee, right? And I'm like, how the hell could this actually be a thing, right? Um, and it's interesting, it happened to me. So I had a house with rocks in brick, right? Because I was an alcoholic, so I wasn't going to mow my lawn ever. That's actually why I picked the house because I thought rocks looked cool, and I knew that I'd be busy getting drunk and I would never have to mow it. And so what happened was I go to prison in brick. Everybody knows me in brick, right? It's not a big place, um, and like weeds start growing through these rocks, right? And I'm like, and I don't know this is happening until one day I'm told I have court and I have video court. And this video court was not as common back then. And I'm like, the hell could I have court for? So I get there and like the Bricktown seal is on the thing. And I'm like, no, I know I have no business here. And it turns out that some code enforcement officer wrote a ticket to the house that says, John never cut his weeds. And then John didn't go to court because John was busy at Bayside State Prison, mopping floors and doing things like that. So they should have warranted for my arrest and suspended my driver's license because I didn't cut my weeds. And I remember like, And I get there and didn't matter. I knew most of the lawyers there knew me. They said, John will handle it. Didn't matter. They paid the $30 court cost or whatever. But it struck me that if this could happen to me with all the advantages that I have, what does a guy to know how to read? What is he or she going through? And then something else a little deeper than that happened over and over is that nobody asked me for money, but nearly everybody asked me for a job, right? I didn't even know I was getting out. And I was, I had my own problems, right? But people started saying, look, John, I wish I could get a job. I don't know how to get a job. I can't get my license. I can't do all these things. So I never forgot that. So I parole out and I learned that McGreevy is doing like county jail ministry or something like that. And then doing a workforce program with the mayor of Jersey City at the time. Well, he's still the mayor, Steve Fulop. So I just reached out to Steve Fulop. I didn't know anybody. I said, hey, look, this is who I am. And I want to be connected to whoever's in charge of that program. I didn't know it was McGreevy, actually. And God bless Steve Fulop. He just hit reply and copied McGreevy on it and said,
great.
Jim, can you talk to this guy?
He's a friend of mine. He came to my bar installation as president, but he's such an amazing guy. So
yeah,
it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so that's what he did. So anyway, then Jim McGreevy and I started chatting, and I said, look, I really just want to put my old lawyer buddies together to stop these old fines, fees, warrants, and we got to talking. And Jim had this great vision of a statewide reentry organization, and we got to talking, and we exchanged ideas, and we took it to Governor Christie, and that's how it was built. That's how that part was built, and that work, because we got so many people jobs, again, got me noticed in D.C. And then they brought me to the Kochs brought me to DC, and I led a lot of big projects there, and and then by chance I ended up just working very closely. I was in the White House many times, in the Oval Office many times, on TV with President Trump on second chance hiring, in the Oval Office when the First Step Act was signed, because there was just a great coalition of like Republican and Democrat people who came together to try to do the right thing, to make sure that people who wanted jobs but had records could get them in a way that made sense for employers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I talked to you briefly, and former retired Superior Court Judge Mark Stanson had the same philosophy that, people would want to work if they could get jobs, and they
Sure.
can't get jobs. They can't get jobs if there's open cases. They can't get jobs if there's felony convictions. And, kind of on that same line of that same idea, created the jobs program to have companies like the casinos, some of the hospitals, employ people in recovery court or who have prior convictions. So, and it really is a shame of like the court costs and the fines that really, in the end, it's an uphill battle for so many clients. I have this story where my dad had somebody who worked for his business who didn't have a license. And my dad had like vending machines and cigarette machines, Coca-Cola machines all over North Jersey. So he needed his staff, his employees to be able to drive. And one of his employees, who he worked for him for years and years, could not get his license back. And my dad finally was like, I am going to go to all these municipal courts and figure this out. And I was not a lawyer yet. I might have been in law school, but I was not practicing in New Jersey. And he went to all the municipal courts and he paid his employees fines and costs, which equaled like $4,000 at the time. My dad paid every single court. And then they went to Motor Vehicle Commission to get his license back. And you know what happened? He couldn't get his license because, in addition to the municipal court fines, then there are Motor Vehicle Commission surcharge fines.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So they're in two different places. And this was an individual who did not have a high school diploma. And he was a really good worker, a really good employee, but and when my dad went to the Motor Vehicle Commission, and they still said he still owed another $4,000 to $5,000 in surcharge. And my dad was like, I don't even think he did it. He was like, this is crazy. The system is crazy that, those are the penalties. And then somebody, can never drive in a state that you have to be able to drive in to work.
Sure. No, I mean, you're the nail on the head, we've attacked this issue in many different ways. In Mississippi, for example, we passed some laws, and the governor at the time was a very, very hard on crime guy, very smart on crime guy named Phil Bryant. And I remember being sent to Mississippi to talk to him about these bills, and I was like, how the hell are you going to send me of all? This is like it'd be like my cousin Vinny, you know what I mean, sending me to Mississippi here, but. The people of Mississippi were wonderful. The policymakers were wonderful. You have deep faith in that state, and I think that you have a real real prioritization of work. So Mississippi, at one point, when we passed a law where people could check in to parole via FaceTime. This is before the pandemic and all those things, right? And like it was like Mississippi and California were the only two like innovative places in America where you could check in with your parole officer by statute via FaceTime, right? But like it's a work barrier, and you can't get anywhere in Mississippi, right? And then of course they started abolishing some of the fines and fees issues in the state. So that's how I got my start in doing this work. I got lucky. I got noticed doing a good job, and I hope a good job. And then it was interesting, I had previously met and been on stage with President Obama. But I did a lot more work from the criminal justice perspective with President Trump. It was interesting because President Trump, if you ever watch interviews with him, he will talk from time to time about his brother, Fred, who died of alcoholism, right? And how Trump doesn't drink. And I think that's probably why he was as open to me as he was when we talk about criminal justice issues, and as candidly welcoming as he was. And it was the interesting thing, not to put politics aside, because I don't, I'm that's not what I'm here to talk about. But like the one thing I think the Trump effect from the First Step Act, which was the big federal legislation that he surprisingly people never thought he'd signed and actually championed. The Trump effect was that hard Republican governors around the country would now do smart criminal justice reform in a broader sense because they had political cover to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. So like the Trump effect on that part of the criminal justice system, like no one's ever captured it. But I would go to states that, would never have spoken to me about criminal justice reform after President Trump wanted to do it. And now they were open to listen. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that effect has helped more people rebuild their lives, more people with justice involvement rebuild their lives than probably anybody else ever could, because he was the most unlikely person one would think to champion such an issue, but he did. Now, of course, if you stepped out of line, the laws that he would pass would bury you under the prison, right? But at the same time, he was my impression of him having, been in the White House, many times was, this is a person who really cared about this particular issue, particularly addiction, right? Because he saw it firsthand.
Right.
Just like Governor Christie, right? Governor Christie has a great, it tells a great story of a personal experience he has with a dear friend who passed away from opioids. And Governor Christie, another Republican that's been a tremendous champion of addiction, public safety focused, criminal justice reform, all the way through addiction treatment and expansion.
Right. Well, criminal justice reform in New Jersey was enacted, bail removed in 2017. And that was
under Chris Christie. Yeah.
So much as we'll make it into either a liberal issue or a Democratic issue, it didn't occur under a Republican administration.
And a tough on crime one, right? Remember, he was a U.S. attorney for 8 years, and he certainly wasn't known for letting people off with a slap on the wrist.
Right. And I would say in New Jersey, when it comes to municipal court cases for nonviolent offenses, for lower level crimes, criminal justice reform works. There are less people being detained on, frivolous matters or matters that would keep them in custody. You can hear my office in Atlantic City. Matters because they can't afford bail. Like there's nobody in custody right now because they can't afford bail because they're indigent. Now, I would say that, you know, I see I see issues with criminal justice reform when it comes to the prosecutor's power to charge, and with certain offenses where there's now presumption of detention, which wasn't there in 2017. They keep adding more charges to the presumption of detention, and you know, the public safety assessment and how that's applied today. But when it comes to indigent clients being in prison or jail, waiting in jail because they can't afford it, that issue has been reformed, and that's good. People shouldn't be sitting in custody because they don't have money, you know.
That's right. That and dangerous people shouldn't be let out just because they have money. And
Correct.
I think that's what a lot of people, you don't forget that, but I think a lot of people don't realize that part of it. Like, I remember bail's a lot of the work I've done for Arnold Ventures, and they keep calling it bail. It was called bail reform, bail reform, bail reform. I said, no, bail reform is like a loaded term, like defund the police, right? Like what this really is, our system in New Jersey is risk-based bail, right? They look at the risk, and if you're deemed too risky, you sit. And if you're not deemed too risky, you get to leave either on your own or with conditions. And I think that my old clients, could buy their way out of almost any bail, subject to a source hearing, but they could buy their way out of almost any bail. That would never happen anymore.
I like that you clarified the source hearing. I feel like you did that because you knew I would be able to call you on it. Because most people would be like, a source hearing? What's a source
Right.
hearing? You know?
Right.
Um, but right, and I do agree with you on that. I think that what's deemed dangerous, is definitely sometimes subjective to where you live, and I again, the charges are sometimes discretionary when it comes to the prosecutor's office. And I know that prosecutors are doing their job just like I'm doing my job, but sometimes, I see like the additional, second degree, or let me throw in this first degree, you know. I might not be able to prove it, but I can establish probable cause, and then it changes the whole calculations kind of get changed. So,
Yeah.
but I think that it's an example of no one system is going to be perfect. I mean, the bail system, based on, I like the way you said it, is just because you have money, you should be able to get out of jail, or you don't have money, you're stuck in jail, is clearly a system that didn't work. The other reform in New Jersey that really has helped over the years is that they moved the driver license suspension from most offenses.
Oh, is that right? I didn't even know that.
Right. So it used to be if you were convicted of a drug offense, you lost your license for a minimum of 6 months to 24
Yep.
months.
I remember that.
You don't lose your license. Underage gambling, 6 months loss of license.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
there's no license suspensions on almost any offense now other than eluding. Um,
Which makes sense. I mean, yeah, I
or
mean, if you have,
leaving the scene of an accident, or,
I didn't lose my license for that actually. Through an anomaly in the plea agreement, my license was never suspended because there was no mandatory suspension on the 2C charge of it. There is on the ticket. But I can tell you that made absolutely no difference in my life because I wasn't driving anywhere in Bayside State Prison.
right. It is now a requirement of that plea. It's a
No.
2-year loss of license under the 2C.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So you'll when you get your law license back, you'll have to catch up on the last
Yeah. I'll be doing maritime law or something like that. I won't be catching up on anything.
No, I
Doing
understand.
maritime.
So with all of this, I mean, your story is I want to say it's like a movie story. It's sad where the what you've had to work through and the trauma that you've experienced, the mental health, um, the I'm going to say crimes that you committed,
Yep.
uh, using your words, and still the ability to affect so many lives positively. I guess I would say to you, um, what is your goals in life now? Your hopes, do you have the long-term plan, or are you still living? I'm sure you're still living day to day.
Yeah, my only goal is to be the best father and husband I can be. That's the only thing I really care about. I don't, and that's really it. it's I'm not driven by career. My career is I want to do impactful work. I want
Hmm.
to help people. I want to make sure that I can do things that help prevent tomorrow's victims, right? Because as I said, I can't build a time machine and not hurt the person that day. If I could, I would. Um, so my priority is to continue to help change systems to prevent tomorrow's victims, help whoever I can along the way, and as many people as I can along the way, and be the best dad and husband I can. And that's the universe I'm going to look at, which is quite interesting, right? So is when you're a defense lawyer doing the kind of work I was doing and the work that you do every day, you know, you think you not you, but I thought I was bigger than I was, right? And today I have much more access to actual power than I ever had before. I have no power of my own, but I have a lot of numbers in my phone if I need to call somebody, right?
Right.
And I think that but I never call anybody. I don't call any favors. I don't do any of the things. I mean, the I've helped a few people get on the bench and things like that, but those are really, really good people without access to do so. And I think that it's I feel that God, because I was ready for that kind of responsibility, right?
Hmm.
God has now given it to me. If God would have given me the access of multiple presidents and half the governors in this country when I was still wilding out as a raging alcoholic, right? God knows what I would have done with it, right? And but
Well,
today, right? Today I'm because my focus is only on being a father and a husband and helping the next person in need.
yeah.
Um, that my career is simply my career ambitions are simply the math problem to make sure I make enough money to do what I have to do for my family and to make sure I'm making a difference. So I can't even believe I say that, because if you would have asked me in 2010 what my plan was, it would have been a much different answer.
Possibly to rule the world. Um, no, but I understand. I would say to you that when your kids get older and they tell you all the things that you don't know, it's like the most humbling experience. And so, if I did think I was going to be ruling the world or making all the connections, and I too, do have a lot of people that I can, call if need be, I would tell you, having four young adultish kids, is humbling enough for that me to know that I am not, as they would say, I'm not all that. They tell me all the things I don't know. So, but I think that it's amazing what you've done, and I think that it's important for people to know that are struggling with alcohol, mental health, drugs, that there is a road to recovery, and there is ways to, you know, uh, or I would say people to reach out to that do want to help and services to provide for them.
Yeah, and I think you have to. I mean, you really you owe it to yourself. Anybody who's listening who might, if anything at all, is familiar that I've talked about in this podcast. If anything is familiar, you already got something wrong. So you better get on the phone with somebody before. I mean, you implode your own life, or as I nearly did. Well, kill somebody. And I think that's there's no words to describe what it's like to live the life I live today, knowing what I did then,
Hmm.
right? And knowing how fucking unnecessary it was, right? Like, not that crime is necessary, but like when I think back about how simple it would have been in life to just not have that occur, right?
Right.
We would have to make a few minor tweaks earlier in life, and that person never gets hurt. It like I bang my head against the wall, thinking about it. But hopefully, if anybody on your show, or excuse me, listening to your show, is going through something similar, reach out. I mean, first of all, well, just Google me, and all my contact information is very easily to find, right? I've been national media and all those things. I'm not a hard guy to find, and I'd be
No,
happy
and
to.
it'll all be on the Mighty Merp website as well.
Yeah.
All your contact information
Well,
will be
great.
there. And so John has just announced that if you need help and you don't know where to go, that you can reach out to him
Yep.
and he will
You
help
call-
make the connection.
100%. 100%. Let's fix this thing together before something really bad happens.
Thank you so much for your time, John. I really appreciate it. I had a
Well, thank you for all you do and for using your significant platform to amplify, you know, these important issues because, you know, someone of your stature and who's so well respected throughout New Jersey and beyond to take an interest in your Friday evening to make sure this message gets out to people in need. I mean, speaks volumes of you, and I'm very, very blessed to just be a small part of this.
Oh, thank you, John. Did you notice my screen got a little darker because the person who thought they were the last person in the office shut off most of the lights during our interview, and I didn't want to get up to turn it back on. So.
I didn't notice that, but you'll catch that in post, as they say.
Yes. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, my friend. Have a wonderful evening and a great weekend.
Thank you.
The best place to listen, watch, like, and subscribe is at mightymerp.com. That's mighty, MERP.com.